This past week has been a roller coaster ride for our Trek family. We lost one member, we welcomed back a familiar face, and yet another actor joins us for the first time in their career, though I feel I've known him for 250 years. Hi, and welcome back to Katie's Corner in Space and the Star Trek Void Volume 9. This is where we fill that gap between new episodes of upcoming Trek by updating on information behind the scenes, revel in what's to come, rejoice in what has been, and occasionally, because we are Trekkies after all, complain about all the perceived mistakes made. But first, saying goodbye to Annie Wersching. Annie's television career began on a first season episode of Enterprise called Oasis, as one of two survivors in a downed ship with her character's father, played by yet another Lost Trek alum, Rene Auberjonois. As an early story in the series, it helped us get to know this new crew a bit better, especially Trip. But you couldn't help but feel for this sheltered young woman whose only life had been on a desolate planet among holograms and her father. Annie once again wowed us with her portrayal of the Borg Queen, creepy and cryptic at each turn. Her portrayal was on point, original of course, but she brought that quiet, sinister deviousness we had come to expect from the runner of the Hive. And while I know many will remember her for her part on various crime dramas, including 24, I will always remember her as Captain Kirk's mom. Okay, Stefan Salvatore's mom on The Vampire Diaries. She will be missed. And while I say goodbye, we also have had some incredible news after last weekend's trailer dropped, along with a new poster revealing two very important things. One, the rumors of Todd Stashwick's return to Trek are all true. He's the newest captain of the Titan, and his character is going to be very surprised, I suspect, before his first ride on a ship with Will and Jean-Luc is over.
Well, we won't be blowing things up.
I personally finally got an answer, sort of, to a question I've been asking since July. Who will Ed Spaliers, aka the pirate Stephen Bonnet, be playing on Picard? As I also post about Outlander and came across the announcement last summer, I've been waiting on pins and needles and am both pleased and surprised to see he's working with Beverly. It gives me hope his character might stick around for a minute. It also gave me a familiar feeling watching him walk Riker along at Phaser Point, so this should be interesting. But that's not all. We learned in the new trailer it looks like the danger may not just be to Picard and the crew of TNG, but according to Worf's voiceover, all of Starfleet. We also see Rafi getting a laser or light shown into her eye, and in the world of Trek, that could mean anything from vision correction to maybe data transfer. The season itself looks like it will be very action-packed with theatrical explosions and special effects we've come to expect from these new inceptions of Star Trek. Well, choreographed fight scenes and those famous shaking ship scenes, but like my 7-year-old after too much sugar, it's on overload. Oh, I do feel kind of bad for Stashwick's character. I bet he thinks he's just ferrying a couple old bigwig troublemakers.
Those were the days.
Oh well, like I said, Trekkies complain, and while this rule may extend to Todd's character, it definitely will always be a truth of Star Trek fans, and one even Star Trek Picard's showrunner occasionally decides to address. One of those occasions popped up recently when one Twitter user pointed out how excited we are about Picard Season 3, but awaiting the complaints of how we no longer have real Trek. I remember when The Next Generation wasn't real Trek, Metalis wrote, recalling the fan backlash to every 90s and early 2000s series. It's fantastic to be excited for a return to the old tone here, but there can and should be many different kinds of Trek. And honestly, there should be. One of the fantastic things about Star Trek since around 2000 is the ability to reach out to people who like more than science fiction. You like a good politically driven war show? Deep Space Nine. You have a penchant for survival shows and Lost in Space? Voyager. Want just a week-to-week adventure with exploration? TNG. Want to see how it all started? Find out why Starfleet loves to power, why Klingons didn't have brow ridges. Enterprise. And of course, we could always turn back to the original. Oh, and don't forget the cartoon. You might laugh, but when special effects couldn't tell the story, cartoons made it possible. Now, of course, there's a true cartoon made for kids, one for adults, even more Klingon history plus an incredible future for the Vulcans and the Romulans, not to mention answers to questions to come as Pike and his crew break in the Enterprise for James T. Kirk, and that takes us back to Picard, where we have seen incredible things we honestly couldn't have expected.
We request provisional membership in the Federation so that we may remain here. A guardian at the gates.
And met characters that helped to bring some stories full circle already. And you know what? It's all Trek. every last pixel and film cell. But we're still going to complain about it, so if you want a good giggle, come check out some of my earlier videos on this card, which should pop up right about now, where I was still trying to figure out my style and decided we should all talk about things Trekkies complain about. But for now, I'd like to change gears and continue with the Trekkie love. In particular, the Armin Shimerman Trekkie love, as we check out a bit of his interview with Daily Star Trek News. In this candid chat, he starts with the completion of the trilogy he's been working on for over 20 years. It's a fictional, historical detective story revolving around the real-life historical figures John Dee and William Shakespeare. And while Armin admits to taking some literary liberties on some details, and good old Bill's age, the events and time, he tells us, are accurate.
Well, the trilogy is both fantasy and history at the same time. So my novels have to deal with John Dee trying to find out the loyalty of a particular count on an island in the English Channel. But it is also historical because almost everything that I put into the novels is historically correct.
So maybe a little light reading for your next flight to a Star Trek convention? Mr. Shimerman also shared his thoughts on working with the beloved Rene Auberjonois, as well as the friendship that grew from working together.
We were great friends, and we did a lot of things together. We did not just Star Trek things. We traveled together, not just for conventions, but for our own enjoyment. We had a lot in common because we were both from the theater, and we had a lot of mutual friends.
And he reveled in his favorite episode of DS9 as well as why it's his favorite.
My favorite is Far Beyond the Stars, which is an episode that has very little to do with Deep Space Nine, except it's a Deep Space Nine show. It has to deal with racism in America, and all of us, we were talking about makeup, all of us are out of makeup for most of that show.
And in between all of that, he revealed he'd recently had the Quark makeup on again, and he shared how he looked very much the same.
About 6 months before COVID hit the world, I went to England and I put on all the makeup again for the first time in decades. I was amazed. My wife was amazed. Ira Bear, our showrunner, was amazed how incredibly like the character of 20 years ago I appeared.
Which leads me to predict that as he looks very much the same, told us he's had the Quark visage on full, we may have stumbled upon an accidental hint as to one of the players we could see on Picard this season. Thankfully, we've only 13 days to go as of the release of this video. I don't know about you, but I'm excited and just can't quit trekking. And if you would like more Star Trek information about Picard and the other shows and actors, check out more videos here, and I'll see you there.